NETTER2 is a very important groundbreaking study in the treatment of neuroendocrine cancers. The neuroendocrine cancers are a somewhat poorly understood disease, but rising in incidence and rising in prevalence, becoming now one of the top 10 cancers in the world. The NETTER2 study looks at a segment of the neuroendocrine patients who really haven't had a standard of care before. And by that, I mean we haven't known what the right treatment is. These are a subset of the more aggressive neuroendocrine patients. Some neuroendocrine patients, the disease is prolonged and the survival times are a bit longer than some of the other cancers. But with this group of patients, we have a need for more aggressive treatment because we know that they actually don't do as well as some of the other neuroendocrine patients. So the NETTER2 study is the first study of any sort that looks at what's called radioligand therapy or peptide radioreceptor therapy, a new way of treating cancer. The way that this cancer treats is we take a radioactive isotope, attach it to a molecule and a target, and try to target the cancer cells selectively through receptors to ensure that the radiation then is emitted only systemically delivered, but the radiation is emitted only to the cancer cells, and we try to preserve the healthy tissue as much as possible. Previous trials, including the NETTER-1 trial, have shown that this treatment is very effective in neuroendocrine tumors for those patients who progressed on previous treatment. This is the first time we're testing it at first line. And so that was the rationale behind the NETTER-2 study. It was a randomized phase 3 trial. It was not blinded because of the different options. Patients were randomized to receive either PRT with lutetium-177 dotatate, or the commercial product name is Lutathera, versus a high dose of octreotide, 60 milligrams. And that was the control arm used in the NETTER-1 study as well. The primary endpoint was progression-free survival. Secondary endpoints included overall survival as well as quality of life. The patients enrolled, they had to be 15 and above. They had to be a higher G2, and by that I mean we used a cutoff of Ki-67, which is a proliferation index, of 10% and above, or a well-differentiated G3 of up to a Ki-67 of 55%. Patients had to have been diagnosed within the last year and couldn't have had really any significant systemic therapy, so they were really treatment-naive patients. So as mentioned, progression-free survival was the primary endpoint, and that generally is a primary endpoint in all neuroendocrine cancers. The hazard ratio of the trial was 0.276, so that translates into a 72% risk reduction or death in the lutetium dotatate arm versus the high-dose octreotide arm. The median PFS in lutetium dotatate arm was 22.8 months. That compared to a high-dose octreotide arm median PFS of 8.5 months. So fairly significant findings in favor of lutetium dotatate as first-line therapy in this patient population. We've also looked at the subgroups in terms of the effect, both in terms of the site of origin, pancreas and small intestine, as well as in the G2s and G3s. And what was reassuring is that this effect was seen throughout all subgroups. It was seen in the G2, G3s, as well as the subgroups of the pancreas and the small intestine. The most common adverse events were nausea, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. There was a little bit more nausea and diarrhea in the lutetium dotatate arm, but there was a little bit more diarrhea and abdominal pain in the high-dose octreotide arm. This is all side effects that we are aware of and are expected both in the octreotide arm as well as lutetium dotatate arm. At the time of reporting, we had one case of a secondary hematological malignancy, but this was fairly early. We have to continue following this, I think, to get a full understanding of the impact of myelodysplastic syndrome with PRRT. Look, I think this is practice changing. I think for the well-differentiated G3 neuroendocrine tumors, we now have good prospective evidence that radioligand therapy works. When we looked at the response rate, which is independent of the control arm, we saw a response rate of 43% with the lutetium dotatate arm, and that's some of the highest rates we've seen in neuroendocrine cancers to date. So I think this becomes a very promising therapy in both well-differentiated G3 neuroendocrine tumors, but also the higher end of the G2 tumors as well.